So good evening and welcome everyone to yet another KMA research webinar series. My name is Dr. Tsige, a member of the KMA Research Committee, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to today's discussion related to funding opportunities in research. I'll be the MC and will introduce the speakers, and later on we shall have a lively Q&A session moderated by Dr. Samakech. But before we get going, I'd like to welcome Dr. Were Onyino, the President of Kenya Medical Association, to make some opening remarks. Please welcome Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Tsige. Thank you all the guest speakers for taking time to join us in this a series of EAMJ ethics and medical research webinars, which we seek to continue empowering our members in terms of diving into the area of research and continue to capacity build KMA membership and our partners so that we can be able to generate locally relevant data which you can use to inform evidence-based practice of medicine in Kenya. Indeed, over the last 2 years, the EAMJ, in collaboration with KMA Ethics and Research Committee, has done a very brilliant job in terms of bringing research training to the members of KMA as we prepare to launch our Ethics and Research Committee in partnership with EPHRC. And I'm happy that one of the speakers today is actually from EPHRC. So we look forward to having a very insightful meeting and to gain from the experience and extensive knowledge from the speakers in terms of how medical doctors can actually delve into the area of research and be able to apply for grants and funding so that we can be able to diversify our income as KMA, also as income as consultants and doctors, so that you can continue addressing the issues of welfare of our members. So thank you again, the committee under the leadership of Dr. Chapaso Obonyo, Dr. Tsige Kiplagat, Professor Nditi, Professor Okeo, and we look forward to a very engaging program today. Back to you, Dr. Tsige.
Thank you very much, Dr. Were. And with that, we'll go straight to our first presentation. And this will be made by Dr. Elizabeth Kemigisha, who's a postdoctoral research scientist at the Africa Population and Health Research Center based in Nairobi, Kenya. She trained as a medical doctor and later acquired a master's in pediatrics and child health, both from MUST, which I believe is Mbarara University, Science and Technology. She holds a PhD in health sciences from Ghent University in Belgium, and she's been involved in various research projects over a span of 13 years, including clinical trials, epidemiological surveys, and multidisciplinary research. She's currently a project manager overseeing the impact evaluation of PEPFAR's DREAMS interventions against HIV/AIDS among adolescent girls and young women in Nairobi's informal settlements. And she will be taking us through the first session, which is opportunities for funding medical research in Kenya and Africa. Welcome, Dr. Kemigisha.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, audience and the hosts of today's webinar. Thank you for inviting us for this meeting. And we are happy to present about the topic on grant applications, the pitfalls, the tips, and the hints. I've been engaged in research for over 12 years. After training as a medical doctor, I found my niche in research, not clinical work. Although both are valuable, but I feel its research is equally as important as the clinical work we do. So I'm happy to present today at the KMA event and to share a few lessons we have learned at APHRC in regard to grant applications. So our vision at APHRC is transforming lives in Africa through research. And our mission is to generate evidence, strengthen research capacity, and engage policy to inform action on population health and well-being. This has been the core work of APHRC, which is now celebrating 20 years of excellence in cutting-edge research and policy influence. So when we look at grant applications, I wanted to make it as interactive as possible. I was looking at, as we apply for grants, we know that we need to make sure that our grant matches the expectation of the agency we are applying for. As an applicant, you have some qualities, professional experiences, capacities, networks, and whatever you have done in terms of your clinical work or research experience that you bring on board. And then you have to be matched with the agency, a kind of marriage. The agency that is offering funds can be looking for someone to give a scholarship for study, someone who needs to implement a research in a cutting edge research in a new area, a novel area of research, or you're looking for an agency for a long-term engagement or consortium that will work towards achieving common goals. So how are you prepared as an applicant to have the same views or meet the expectation of the funder? So this is the first thing we look at when we are trying to look out for funds. Okay, where are you applying to and what do you bring on board? And what is the expectation of those who are going to give you the funds? And to ensure a perfect fit, we must make sure that we meet the goals, our own personal goals, and also the goals of the funder. This could be in the scientific arena, similar research interests, or institutional goals, both for the applicant and the funder. The funders always have goals of how many grants they are giving out and for what purpose. We have common financial goals. It has to be a gain-gain on both sides, and also possibly educational goals. Sorry, yeah, thank you. So what are those challenges we face when we are sending in our applications? As an applicant, you need to be aware that there are several competitors. Most of the grant applications, the success rate is even less than 30%. So just know, as an applicant, you have so many competitors. How do you overcome this competition to get to the top? Okay, we shall discuss also about the funding agency. Whatever you're applying for should be relevant to their funding goals, okay? They do not give their money anyhow to anybody. They want to know that whatever that we are applying for, they find it relevant to their institutional goals and development. And when we look at the goals as scientists, we look at the scientific contribution we are making to this world, okay? And this is not just science. In terms of health science, we also political science, data science, and social science, okay? So of what scientific value are you bringing in on board that is superior to the rest of the applicants? So this is what we describe as a perfect fit, when you're able to overcome the challenge of being in a competition and emerge as the best winner, and also meet the agency expectations. So how do we handle the issue of competition? So competition is tough out there. It's a rough world in the time, even when your proposal is one of the best. possibly the funders want to fund one that year. So they can even invite you to submit your proposal another year because they find it difficult to deny you an opportunity, but maybe the fund available can only meet one successful applicant. So your personal CV or personal qualifications here matter a lot. We'll find that the higher your academic qualifications, the higher the chances of winning these grants. And also how you state your training. It's not just having a PhD, but also other qualifications you have acquired in terms of skills that are indicated on your CV. Who are your connections? If the funding agency, for instance, is USAID, and they want to fund someone in Kenya, they would want to know whether you have a collaborating institution in the US. So have you managed to have connections with the people where the funding agency is? Have you published the paper together? And the connection is not just a Facebook like, they want really a documented connection. For instance, having had a similar grant that is implemented together or having a joint publication, that is and also the length of that connection. For instance, if you have collaboration with an institution for 5 or more years, then the funder is convinced that you're ready to take on this project successfully. Who are your recommenders? Recommendations are very important and they also add value to our applications. Most of the government agencies, when they recommend a project, especially in a context that is controversial, then they feel, the funders feel that there will be government support to implement that project. So a recommendation from a government agency would be a good one, a recognized funding institution, or other people or researchers of higher standing. And also history of grant management, successful completion, and also how long or how big those grants were. This is always challenging, especially for people entering the field the first time. Even the Bible says those who have will be given more. So the new entrants, it's always challenging that we have to start by having those connections with people who have won grants and then slowly establish our own niche. We usually also are asked to provide a personal or institutional support letter. And these letters also bind the institution that they are committed to ensure that the applicant is going to ensure successful completion of the project. This, in a way, helps that in case anything happens to the principal investigator, for instance, replacement can be done and the institution takes on the role of the implementation. So they wouldn't want to fund someone who is not connected to any institution, academic institution or research institution, because the security of their funds is not guaranteed, especially if you're an individual independent researcher. And also added on your CV are the CVs of your co-applicants, how strong they are. All this helps in ensuring that you emerge as the best competitor. So be self-confident and have self-appraisal to see how do you gauge yourself compared to a competitor you haven't seen, because those people who apply may not know each other at this point. Then we have relevance to the funding agents. I told you this is like a marriage. So there's what you bring on board and the expectation of the funder. And some of them, when you look at the websites, their values and development goals are clear. So you need to know that you submit a proposal that is relevant and meets the expectation of the funding agency. For instance, we look at areas like context. Are they interested in multinational collaborations, in humanitarian crisis investigation or implementation, low-income countries, having collaborations with the developed countries? So we need to know what is the context of this fund they have called out for. And what is your strategy, your organization, where you belong to, and how it fits in what the funder expects, okay? How urgent is the problem that you're going to solve, okay? So sometimes they need quick funds to investigate an epidemic, for instance, COVID. So they'll say we are having so much fund and the projects that are aligned to getting solutions around scaling up vaccination for COVID are invited. So if you're invited for such and your proposal is aligned to that, then you find that you are meeting the funders' expectation. And funders continually have got tired of proposals where you investigate and find more problems, like cross-sectional surveys. You found the problem was this, and then from your investigation, you have discovered there were so many other problems. So they are now aligned so much into solution-based or implementation-based research to provide solutions to the current existing problems, not to generate evidence that there are more and more problems. So it's important that we have an eye view to ensure that we review the content in our research application or funding application, that we captivate this funder to see the relevance in offering us research funds. And definitely in advancement of research, the scientific value is very critical. What does it contribute to good science? The fund would like to fund research that is state of art, that adds scientifically new knowledge, and possibly a new application of previous knowledge in an advanced way, or when our methods are well described and there are defined goals with an adequate budget. Sometimes because of the competition, some people may under budget and think that they would possibly be funded because they have quoted the lowest value. But someone will say, well, this is an ambitious project and what you have put in the budget may not meet all the requirements. So it's important at the time of application that we get a critical evaluation of all these points in advancement of science, and especially from those who have successfully applied for such grants. Get an evaluation of your grant application before sending it out there, because at least someone will have noted some of these points could be emphasized or they are missing, and then the application will be more competitive. Most importantly, most people will meet what we have mentioned, but is your application attractive, okay? Does the reviewer understand it? Some of these reviewers are drawn from different audiences, not necessarily the health field where you are, but you find that especially us in the medical profession, we use a lot of jargon and we think that everyone understands what we are saying. So sometimes the reviewer may lose track of what you're trying to say because you have made your application very complex. You cannot determine beforehand who will review your application, but most times they make a diverse audience of people who will review these applications. So make sure that whatever you write is clear and can be clearly understood by a diverse audience. Some of our writing is not captivating, that the reviewer gets bored along the way of reading the introduction, okay? At this point, they wonder whether they should go ahead and read the entire proposal. So is your proposal readable, attractive, that someone cannot wait to reach the next and next page? Is it convincing to an outsider not familiar with the context? And this is very challenging, especially the developing world has a unique context that is not clearly understood across board. So what if the reviewers are not from Africa? Will they understand clearly what you mean? Imagine that you are a stranger in your own country or context and try to explain everything in a simplified approach for anyone to understand. It should be complete, and all sections that have been mentioned are there, especially if you have a template that you need to fill. And it should also be competitive in a way that it brings a timely solution, especially in view of the current research topics or development problems. We know that there's some research that can, funding that can be available, for instance, for neglected tropical diseases. So sometimes you need to also captivate the times. Even if you have a research interest in maternal health, but if you related your problem of maternal health to an epidemic challenge like COVID, maybe that proposal may be captivating, especially in the recent times. So you need to tailor whatever interest you have to also the current challenge. Otherwise, you will face a lot of competition where people are trying to solve the problems that are relevant or are being discussed in the times when you submit. So how we write proposals, it really depends on the submission requirements. Some proposals you have to start from an empty page with no template. So these are some of the areas that we think are important to include in the proposal. For instance, the title, they may ask for a less summary or an abstract, and some of the application guidelines are mindful of the word count, and you need to stick to that with no, you don't have to add less. And usually I was advised by my mentors that if they say word count is 1,000, try to reach towards the max, write 800 or 900 words. Why write 100 when we say that this section, you can write as much as 1,000 words. So you should have also clear research questions, a state-of-art background with novelty of the proposed research. This is, most people stop at the first page. So if you don't captivate them to reach the methods, they may throw out your application before they read the entire application, okay? And the other obvious part, the project activities, the output, having accompanying administrative signatures and approvals. Most importantly, if the reviewer can move from the first 2 pages to the next page, what they're interested in is ensuring that your methods are really, really well written with well-defined target populations and estimated periods of data collection, and who are your interested subjects, who is involved in the data collection, how trained are they, and of course, what equipment you would need. You also predict what the limitations could be in carrying out that activity, and also importantly, the budget. I told you earlier that the budget can be challenging, especially we know that most researchers, you may not be equipped with both the scientific and also the administrative skills. So you need to work as a team and make sure that there's someone who is well-versed with financial budgeting and helps you with this section such that you don't under budget or exaggerate the resources. So importantly, they want to know where you're coming from and what is available. The funder doesn't want to start from scratch, okay? Do you have office space, IT, vehicles, or networks, or even sometimes people say, for this funding, we want to be sure that your institution can contribute 10%. So you need to tell us what that 10% of that grant would be. And this could be personal time. Say there's a professor who will be reviewing our work and is offering 5% of his time for free or something. So you need to really tell us what is available as resources, and also work towards not inflating them and making sure that they are within the funding targets. If the funds are available is 1 million and you write a proposal and you say you want 2 million, possibly you won't be funded. A few things to avoid: language. We know that English may be our second or third language, but people get incensed when they find typos. When it's supposed to be plural, you're missing an S, you're missing a full stop. That kind of floppiness in submission, when someone has given you the time to review, it shows that the applicant did not take their time to read through their proposal. And most of these proposals may be not considered. Not following submission guidelines, I told you about the page limit, the word count, missing sections. Those ones, even if they say attach certificates or approvals from where and you don't put them, then at screening stage, that application will not proceed. And also use of jargon, especially doctors, please. Let's try to imagine that we are communicating to a politician or someone who has not been to medical school, and they are the ones supposed to give us these funds. So as you write, try to simplify the terms and avoid jargon and all these abbreviations that may be challenging to the reviewer. Repeated or no advance of previous published work. So people are looking at your history, what you have done, and even the proposal is showing that you're going to find out more of what you have already done without adding a new problem that you're trying to approach or a different way to look at a solution. Titles, summaries, and abstracts that fail to represent the subject matter. The challenge we have, some people write the abstract first, but just know it's the one thing that people will read and decide to continue or not. So if there are 1,000 applications, they are reading the first page. And if it's not captivating, the title or the abstract does not lead them to understand what the problem is all about, even if the content is well stated, then you might lose out at that stage of evaluation. Yeah, so still the introduction, I've mentioned about it. So in conclusion, let us start early. Do not wait for the call for funds. Just develop your idea as early as possible, polish it, and make sure it's reviewed, it's updated, such that when an opportunity comes, then you are just updating it according to the funding application guideline. Work as a team. This helps us to realize our strengths and weaknesses and what each team member may contribute. Review and follow the guidelines. Write well and simply. Proofread. We even have a suggestion that print it out and read it on the bus and make sure that you have addressed all the typos. And print out what you consider the final version and have it reviewed by someone who is superior or more experienced in these applications. What we have to remember, that even if we follow all the rules to the dot, we have a chance of not making it through. So if you're rejected, learn the lessons, do not give up. But if you succeed, share the lessons such that others can also learn from you. So this is what I had to present, and thank you a lot for your time. And I hope we can all support each other to get grants to advance research in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kemigisha, for that presentation and really taking us to the basics of getting our proposals right. I'd like to remind the audience to share their questions in the dedicated Q&A tab at the bottom of your screens. You can also put them in the chat box, which is still fine. I'd like to introduce our next presenter, Professor Winston Nyandiko, who is a professor of pediatrics in the Department of Child Health and Pediatrics at Moore University School of Medicine. He's also the Executive Director of Research and Senior Consultant Pediatric HIV Care at the USAID AMPAC Partnership, as well as a Senior Consultant at MTRH Newborn Unit. At the moment, he manages collaborative research, his responsibilities being availing information on funding opportunities, helping in initiating contacts between investigators, managing conflict amongst investigators, training researchers on grant writing, as well as ethical research practices, and mentoring young researchers. So Professor Nyandiko will take us through the second presentation, which is grant applications for research funding. Welcome, Professor Nyandiko.
Thank you, Dr. Sigay, and thank you for inviting me to give this presentation. A lot of what Elizabeth has said is going to be repeated in some of my presentation. but it has more detail about specific way of grant application so that somebody can get good funding. Why do research? One of my mentors, Bill Tierney from Indiana, always said researchers share an almost indescribable joy of finding something out that nobody else has ever known before. It is an insatiable addiction that motivates them and their entire career. They want to change the world. And that is what has remained with many of us as we started about 25 years ago. And it is a pleasure. So I know I have only 15 minutes, but I'll try and go through some of the things which are important for a successful grant application. This graph here shows what we have done as AMPATH, getting to almost 20 billion Kenya shillings. If you can see down here, 200 million US dollars ever since we started doing our research activities. This is astronomical. And if you look at the graph around 2004, this research mainly around HIV, but currently we are doing much more into chronic diseases and cancer and so on. So extremely astronomical growth, and that is what institutions should really target to do. This pie chart here shows you who is mostly funding us. So if you have 20 billion shillings, 20 billion Kenya shillings, most of it comes from the US National Institute of Health, about 80%. Intramural, meaning from our institutions of learning, we only have 1%, and this is a real, is a desperate situation. Our Kenyan budget is supposed to allocate 2% to research, but this is not happening. So we must urge government to really pull up the socks in terms of what they are giving. This graph just demonstrates that with funding, then you get a lot of publications. We have over 1,100 articles in peer-reviewed journals, which is quite exciting. So in my short presentation, I'll just go through understanding how grant proposals are reviewed, develop an approach to grant writing, develop confidence that that good, solid research proposals can be written, and review some of the tips which already Elizabeth has been able to give us. Sorry, this is now not moving. Chair, are you able to hear me still?
Yes, we can still hear you, Prof.
I don't know why
stop sharing and reshare. Sometimes it's just a technical issue.
My slides are stopping. They are not moving. So I can, okay, let me try and reshare.
Yes. Yes, we can now see it. Maybe just full screen and then we.
Okay, now it's moving.
Yes.
So one of the key things as you write your proposals is to know how grant proposals are reviewed. And so they are reviewed at 2 levels, the primary and secondary reviewers. The primary and secondary reviewers give a lot more attention, and they review the entire grant proposal and write summary reviews and then lead the discussions in the study section when these proposals are being reviewed. But they also give other reviewers who quickly look at the proposal, do not look at the appendices, and read selected charts of the grant, including executive summary, specific aims, and scan through the grant application generally, but also help in scoring for the grant that is being sought for. What do reviewers look for in general is really about what Elizabeth already hinted, importance of the research question, what is the quality of the method you're using, appropriateness of the study site in terms of, are you able to get the numbers or the participants that you need? And do you have the facilities to do the research? And then prior achievements of the investigators, as already indicated, the budgets, and overall the likelihood of success and impact on the clinical science and healthcare. So those are key things that reviewers look out for. And in the written comments, reviewers will be asked to discuss the following aspects. And these are what many of our grant applications will look like, especially if you are getting USG research grants, most of them are from National Institutes of Health. They look at the significance of the study, the approach you're giving to achieve your objectives, whether there is any innovation, whether the investigator or investigators are actually well, grounded and can do the work, and the environment where you're going to be doing this. So in significance is really as simple as saying what is the importance of the problem, and explain how the proposed project will improve scientific knowledge, technical capability, and or clinical practice. And also describe how the concepts, methods, technologies, treatments, or services will make a change in the life, but also if the aims that you have prescribed are actually going to be achieved. Understand, they ask the question about innovation. What are you bringing different? Explain how the application challenges and seeks to shift current research or clinical practice paradigms. So you need to describe any novel theoretical concepts that you have, and so that you have something that looks at slightly different. If you're talking about instrumentation or interventions to be developed or used, and any advantage over existing methods. Because if you are having an innovation, you either are building on what is there or are doing something totally new. The approach is one of the most important, as already very well described by Elizabeth. Describing your overall strategy, methodology, and analysis, especially the methods. And you cannot win a grant award if your methods are not comprehensive. And include how the data will be collected, analyzed, and interpreted. You must discuss also the potential problems and how you will have alternative strategies and the benchmarks for success to achieve the aims. If the project is in the early stages, you also must describe strategy to establish feasibility. So sometimes people apply for grants to basically do feasibility study to see whether certain approaches will actually be successful. And then you must point out the ethical issues, whether procedures, situations, or materials that may be hazardous to personnel, because we know that as you do research, the most important thing is to protect the participant. The investigator, I'll not go into a lot of details. He must be trained, well suited for that job, with appropriate experience. And of course, if you have early stage investigators or new investigators, then they need to have the proper training, but also maybe co-PIing with somebody who already has good experience. And this is significant because this funding, as you see, most of it is not from within, and people who are reviewing have, as it were, some vested interests. And if the project is collaborative, who are the program directors or co-program directors, co-PIs? Do the investigators have the complementary and integrated expertise? So that if you are doing something in the community, you have somebody who has community experience, and you have somebody who has research experience. If you are doing something in the laboratory, are you having somebody in your team who is good in those areas? Then the environment is key. Why here? Why are you doing the study where you're doing it? Does the scientific environment in which your work is going to be done contribute probability of success? So if you're going to do some investigations, for example, lab works, do you have a good facility that can do that? Elizabeth already alluded to what some grants will want in terms of compliance to certain things. Do you have a good system that will ensure that when you get these funds, they are actually administered in the right way? So, and is there evidence of institutional support so that if in case the PI is unavailable, somebody is accountable? So remember that an application does not need to be strong in all categories. You can have certain sections which you're doing very well, and but innovation, I think, is essential to advance your possibility of getting funded. Specific aims are the heart of the entire proposal, and this, of course, describes what you'll do with the funders' money. It needs to be concise and short and clear, one pager. And you are directly responding to the request for announcement, which most of us, the RFS or request for applications or proposal announcement, it is the construct for the rest of the proposal. And all reviewers will read the aims, whether they are the primary and secondary or the other reviewers. And the introductory paragraph must contain a brief but convincing justification for the entire project. Significance, again, often provided in the request for announcement. Do your own literature review, cite your own prior work or works that you've done with colleagues. You need to convince the reviewers that you know the field well and you're up to date ahead of the curve. And you must keep it brief. You don't want to bother reviewers from the first minute. And I think this has already been quite well emphasized. And in the section of innovation, this is key because it proves that your ideas will reshape the world. You know what's known and what is needed. You are grounded in theory or theoretical models. You also must keep this as short as possible, but not too short. And convince them that what you propose is new and innovative, and you can actually be able to carry out the activities as you propose. And so you must have in the approaches, the methods, of course, laying on your aims and objectives. Have a brief overview, cite subjects and recruitment, how you do this, intervention if relevant to your project, how you collect your data. This is really where the rubber meets the road. You must give detail, the primary and secondary outcomes, your analysis plan, and of course, the power of your study. And so details are important in the approaches. Don't leave anything to the imagination of the reviewers. Work with them. They need to see it. They need to feel it. They need to test it. And don't overestimate the reviewers' intelligence, skills, attention, or kindness. Often people who do reviews have a lot of other engagements and activities, and they might not actually be as specialists in those areas. So you need to be able to give them the detail that they need. You need to keep it organized, as I've mentioned, along the lines of the specific aims. Use things like bulleted lists, tables, figures, and these are usually much easier to understand. And make sure you have a theoretical model for any intervention and data to be collected. And don't oversell yourself or your site. Don't overpromise what you won't be able to do. And if you foresee potential problems, you always must, again, in that write-up, provide alternative strategies, and the benchmarks for success must be clearly presented. And don't hide your weaknesses, deal with them, because some people try to say, I should not say this side doesn't. You need to deal with that because those are potential pitfalls, and minimize arbitrary decisions, and when they are necessary, provide alternatives. Don't use fonts smaller than Arial 11, because again, if you have many applicants and a reviewer is looking at several of them, they tend to look at those which are legible. If the project involves clinical research, there should be plans to protect the human subjects from research risks, as is always ethical. And the inclusion of minorities and members of both gender and children should be justified in terms of the scientific goals. Remember the vulnerable populations, including prisoners and so on, are people that you must carefully engage and make sure you are doing ethical research. So if the project is in the early stages, you must, as mentioned already, do some feasibility and especially look at what are the risky aspects that you are going to manage. Then additional points, you must read your RFA repeatedly. There are some details you might miss on first glance and you must go back and look at them. Start early, as already mentioned. Seek for criticism. Give your reviewers time to give back feedback, and listen to advice. It is like drilling for oil. Success is only 50-50. The chances of you getting funded on the first is really minimal. But as we've mentioned again earlier, you don't want to give up. If you if you have an opportunity, please also think about serving on some of the grant review committees and take a scientific writing course so that your English and your prose is good, and take a grant writing course so that the tricks of the trade are well, you are well grounded in those. Getting mentoring is key. All of us, at least in the program that we run in Moi University, AMPAT, we try and have as much mentorship for junior investigators. So people do research and bring up people through the postgraduate programs and the young people joining in the departments or in the faculty to join us. Some important tips as I wind up. You need to, this is not very clear, but you need to make your project goals realistic. So don't propose work that you cannot reasonably be able to do. And you must start writing the application, think about the budget and how it's related to your research plan. As we mentioned, you have to be realistic and make sure that the personnel have appropriate scientific expertise and training. You also need to be organized and logical so that whoever is looking at your proposal can follow it clearly. Clear headings, use diagrams, as we already mentioned, use bullets, and utilize white space effectively. Be organized and logical, and write in clear, concise language. This is important. Again, as we've mentioned, reviewers are often not happy when they get something that does not look to be very clear to them. We have reviewers from all over the world. So you might have a reviewer who is in South America, somebody who is in Asia, and so you must be able to use language which is internationally recognizable. Make your points as direct as possible, avoid excessive language, and write simple and clear sentences of about 20 words, and use active rather than passive voice. For example, we will develop an experiment, not an experiment will be developed. So those are some of the simple things that often reviewers look down upon. Then sell your ideas on paper. Capture the reviewer's attention by making the case for funding. Include enough background, and support your idea with collaborators. As we were earlier mentioned by Elizabeth, some of these collaborators, funding is from Europe, is from the US, is from, unfortunately, most of our funding is from those international places, and we must pitch tent in Kenya and try to tell government that research, especially in our tertiary institutions and our teaching institutions, is important, and they need to give it funding. Then, of course, edit yourself, but also enlist help. Allow someone else to look at your proposal, check for simple things, punctuation, and they should give feedback. Remember, sloppy or disorganized application may lead to reviewers to conclusion that your research will be conducted in the same manner. And remember the details and the formatting requirements of each request for application will be different. And I think we are coming to the end. You request your colleagues or mentors to review a draft of your specific aims early in the process. And you need to allow time for an internal review by collaborators, colleagues, and mentors, because people who have done it before know where the shoe might be pinching. So they'll be able to actually highlight and tell you, here, you need to do this and that. You need sufficient time, because a complete application, as already mentioned, has several components. Apart from the write-up itself, you need support documents from your institutions. You might need other approvals to be underway. And so it's good to be able to start as early as possible. So, Chair, I think that is my last slide, and I'd like to acknowledge Professor William Tierney. Some of the slides I've used are borrowed from his grant writing presentations, and my employer, Moi University, and the AMPAT program for the work that they are doing that allows us to get funding to this extent. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Nyandiko, for that excellent presentation, going into the detail of how to write appropriate proposals, particularly related to grants. At this stage, I'd like to welcome Dr. Sam Akech from Kenya. KEMRI Wellcome Trust, who's a principal investigator, as well as a consultant pediatrician. It's interesting today that both the speakers and the moderator are actually pediatricians. So that's an interesting thing happening there. So Dr.
Yeah, good
Samakech,
researchers.
feel free. They're excellent researchers, yes. So I think on that note, Dr. Samakech, you can, I invite you to support the Q&A session. Take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sigei, and I would like to thank both our presenters, Dr. Kemigisha and Prof. Nyandiko, for those excellent talks. And just to try and paraphrase some of the key points that they brought out, Dr. Kemigisha really talked about, highlighted some of the, when you're doing your grant applications, the pitfalls and the challenges, and really stressed on the need to find the perfect fit for the funding you're seeking or the research that you're doing. And there are three competing interests that you have to reconcile. That is your own research needs, your institution's needs, and the funder's needs. Because you may have desires, you may have some ideas that you want to pursue through research, but you need to find an institution that can accommodate that research and a funder that can be doing it, a funder that is interested in funding that area. She also brought out the importance of having of your CV, that is your track record that's reflected on your CV, that funders would also be interested in the support that you'll get in your institution. So you are unlikely to be funded if you don't have institutional support, but also support from mentors. And that was also brought by Prof. Nyandiko. The relevance of the project is quite important. The project needs to be relevant, and that also brings issues like, is it timely? Is it a topic that is of interest at that time? There's importance of having good science, so there must be scientific value for anything that you're proposing for funding. It needs to be attractive, so this point was brought by Dr. Kimugisha and also stressed by Prof. Nyandiko, that when you're writing a proposal, it needs to be written in a way that is very easy to read, because often the people who make those funding decisions may not be technical people who understand the subject you are talking at very deeply. So it needs to be written in a way that they can easily understand it and see the value of it. So being simple and lay is quite important. Of course, it needs to be budgeted appropriately. And one of the messages Dr. Kemugisha brought is that there may be a lot of challenges, but do not give up. And once you succeed, then you need to share your lessons. Prof. Nyandiko took us through the details on how to go through your applications, quite detailed, how to go through structuring your application, stressed the importance of, in your proposal, having a clear innovation. So it needs to be clear what innovation that you're bringing. The methods need to be appropriate. The problems, you also need to indicate what problems may be anticipated and how you handle them. The importance of indicating that you have a team that can actually work within that research, and that you've got a supportive environment for that research is quite important. So you can see really it's being stressed that apart from you being able to do the research, you always need to demonstrate that you've got an enabling environment for that, for it to be attractive to funders. And the big message from Prof. Nyandiko was that you can actually do this, so you can get funding. So there are a number of questions coming up in the chat, but just to start off, most of the doctors here may be wondering, how would you advise the young doctors or those going through their first application for the first grant? How would you advise them to go about it? And I would like to pose this question to our two presenters, both Dr. Kemigisha and Prof. Nyandiko, just their take on advice for people going for their first grant applications, or people who are still young in the field. Yeah. Dr. Kemigisha?
Thank you so much for your question. My advice to the first applicant, the first time you send out an application for a grant, just know that we all started there. So even people who are the highest winners, they started somewhere. It's important that you have taken a step confidently. I told you the competition is very high. If you don't make it, at least you will learn from the reviewer comments and how to improve your application. But for first timers, it's better that you attach yourself to a mentor and ensure that you have been a co-applicant and you're growing in the field of application before you send in your first individual grant. Sometimes the grant is targeting you as a person, like a seed grant or a grant for a young researcher of a certain value. So start for low hanging fruits, small grants, and slowly this will give you the confidence to aim higher. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kemigisha. Prof. Nyandiko?
Yeah, that's an important question. And I think looking through the charts, I've seen another one or two questions to that regard. So Elizabeth has said it. When you are starting, remember even the people who are getting their billions of shillings over time is around persistence and being able to follow those who have done it before. So mentorship panels are important, and we can't overemphasize that. Where you have senior colleagues who are already doing the business, attach them and see how they do it. As you do your applications, get somebody who has done it to read through and tell you what else you need to panel bit. But importantly, also do a bit of training. So we've already talked about have a course in grant writing, so that as you start on it, you already have very good grounding. And often the younger investigators are torn in many other activities. So you think doing clinical work will give you much more money. So you're not busy in other areas. You're not concentrated on taking your 3 hours in the afternoon or in the night to write something. And so you really also want to have sort of your curve. This is the area I want to go, and you work on it. Researchers don't sleep; they write grants at night. The ideas come as they sleep. So somebody wakes up and goes to write. And so then you make use of small grants available. In MTRH, for example, the hospital has actually grants that I chair the intramural grant for Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, where people apply for small grants, 1 million shillings, 2 million shillings. And so we have a panel of people who review that and say this is worth it. And so the younger investigators can start with the local small intramural grants, what we call startup grants. And then once you get something published from your starter application, you can then apply for other bigger grants, because often, as you say, you are able, you must demonstrate that you have done something before. So that's what I'll advise the younger investigators. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Nyandiko. And you have another question from the chat. So yeah, there's a comment, great talk, Prof. Nyandiko. Kindly speak to the process of resubmission. Say you get good scores from 2 reviewers and a poor score from 1. Any tips on reframing?
Yeah, good question again, and that's where the inside story is important. And oftentimes, where you're applying to, you might have a connection here and there. You might know who are looking at this. They of course will not tell you, but that kind of background might be important. Secondary submission, if you have a fairly good score, is something that we always encourage people to do, because you receive certain comments that then you need to go and work on and brush up so that your next resubmission will be good. you'll be surprised that some of those that are told this cannot happen, they might come to you and tell you, bring that proposal here. We want to fund it at a certain level, maybe lower. So modify this section and this section, reduce your budget, and we shall give you funding. So if you actively continue applying, you always will get the funding through.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Nyandiko. There's a question here, and it's more, I think it's more directed widely. How can we promote multidisciplinary pediatric research across Africa that could attract funding? And I think that is because the three are all pediatricians. So who wants to take that? Dr. Kemigisha?
This is a tough one. How do we promote multidisciplinary research? First, we should show the willingness to have the ability to join research networks with multidisciplinary teams. In my former workplace, actually, I was teaching in a faculty where they teach social sciences, and we do interdisciplinary studies. So we need to work on our attitude first. Are we willing to work with people from different disciplines? Doctors always consider themselves superior. And yet we know that when we look at health in a holistic manner, you cannot address health by just giving medicines and admissions. All this prevention work needs social workers, the politicians to be on board. So let us show the willingness and expand our networks, especially when we have webinars like this. I would expect some opening speeches to be from the non-medical fraternity and how they are working together with us to achieve the same goals. So I will give the same question to Professor who is familiar with the context, but in my world, I think there's no question about it. We cannot work without multidisciplinarity.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think, thank you. Elizabeth has put it quite clearly, multidisciplinary, and that's most of the research you do, you find that you start doing an activity in the clinical area, and you find that you need to go to the community, you have mental health issues coming up, you have socioeconomic issues coming up. So you must have all these teams that are able to complement your ability to do more interventional research. In Africa, I think we already have a few networks. For example, within the HIV area, we have IDEA, which is in the region. We have regions in the East Africa. We have Southern Africa IDEA, which collects data and is able to merge them. And so this is already going on in particular areas, HIV specifically. And I know that in other areas like chronic disease, those might be going on. The approach is to do both pediatric and adult kind of pooled data, because the questions in Africa might be specific to us. And remember that we already have mentioned that the funders have certain interests, but you must also demonstrate to the funders that you are in charge of what you want to do. Identify where your areas of research need to be. And that's where government should also come in, because we often do research and we don't feed them with the policy statements or what we are saying about our research or output. And therefore, they don't even, in their processes, do not consider research as important. But also government should tell you, for example, in West Pokot, we have this problem here, and we need you people to try and investigate it, so that across board now you can talk about having somebody from Uganda and having somebody from Kenya to look at what is going on in that region. So there is opportunity, but we might, of course, we need a lot more coordination and from the governments, because if you can do it as institutions of learning, of higher learning, but you get a bit of limitation. But if the governments have a way of saying, yeah, we can add this, the ministries of health, ministries of education, that will raise the platform of doing a collaborative research within Africa.
Okay, thank you both Prof and Dr. Kemugisha. Just to add is that I do research with Cambridge Wellcome Trust looking at severe febrile illnesses. And some of the work we do, we have collaborated with researchers even from outside the country. But often you find that when you collaborate, even in countries outside Kenya, in Africa, you find that a lot of your collaborators may not even be people who are primarily from those countries, but they could be from the northern countries, but working there. So there's a point Prof. Nyandiko mentioned that it requires, even researchers like clinical work also require dedicated time. So I would say that if people who are interested in research put in the time, then it's possible for people to actually have a network of people who are really dedicated in the research areas and could build collaborations. And I think the key thing is just reaching out. So like from here, if you note people who are publishing in a given area or doing research in a given area, start reaching out and then see if you can work on things jointly. There's a question I will pose to Dr. Bonyo. There's a question that came from Prof. Mwanda. Do you want to take that up? The KMA Research Committee consider having mentors for proposal writing?
Yes, I don't know if I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. Thanks very much, Dr. Ketch, and thanks very much, Dr. Kemigisha and Prof. Nyandiko for the talks. Very exciting talks, and thanks to Professor Mwanda for the question. As KMA Research Committee, first of all, I just want to say in the research field, we like to look at it as we don't fail. We either succeed or we learn. So this is very important point to try and make, especially in light of the question that was asked in terms of resubmissions. So if you're asked to resubmit something, don't look at that as a failure. Look at that as a learning experience. Prof. Mwanda, the question is very important. In this call, I noticed I must recognize the presence of students from the Medical Students Association of Kenya. So as part of building the next generation, we try and hold the hands of these students and bring them on board whatever projects we are undertaking. Through the Kenya Medical Association National Executive Council, we've also submitted a proposal to the World Health Organization to try and get some funding to set up an institutionalized mentorship program. So there is different aspects that we are trying out as KMA. Of course, it can never be enough. The demand is always more than the supply, and we always try to encourage the students to reach out, as Dr. Sama Ketch has just rightly mentioned. If you find there's an area of research that's interesting for you, first of all, read some of the papers around there, reach out to some of the researchers in that field. Researchers will always take an interest in you if you've actually shown more than an interest and read one or two papers in the field. The other thing we're doing is KMA, of course, is a voluntary membership organization, and some of our very senior colleagues, I noticed on the call, like yourself, Professor Mwanda, I did notice one of my very senior colleagues, Professor Hilary Mabea, also on the call. Some of these people have held hands of both ourselves, myself, other students, and they're very more than willing to help students come up. So there's really no straight answer to your question. We're trying to get an institutionalized mentorship program, but we also work through some of the very senior colleagues who are on the call, others are not, and we get lots of support from them. So thanks very much, Dr. Ketch. I hope I've tried to answer the question.
Yeah, thank you. Very well answered, Dr. Bonyo. There were a few comments in the chat. I think there's a comment about the frustration with how fundings may end up in the wrong accounts, like they end up in the county government accounts. That came from Dr. Maingi, and was just wishing that the county governments could streamline that. That has been a problem. And that is where it really helps if you are in an institution that can manage your funds. So most of the research institutions, for example, at AMPATH, you'll find that there's a department that manages those grants and can actually account to the funders on how the money has been used. So that's definitely a challenge. And if you're applying for funding, you probably need to factor that in and see that the money will come to the right account, and it's going to be accounted for. There was a comment about congratulations to AMPATH. How I wish our Kenyan universities and stroke all colleges could have fully fledged, could have technically fully fledged units for research and grants for local and international, which could be more sustained in Kenya. I don't know, Prof. Nyandiko, do you know if the experience in AMPATH is also in other universities, and whether there's something that people could look out for in other universities?
Yeah, that is a very interesting comment. And universities are struggling because of poor financing. Many of our public universities depend on the exchequer for their operations, which cannot allow them to give a cent for research. I know that within our own university, apart from AMPATH, which as you mentioned, has a dedicated office, so that funding coming in is able to meet the requirements of the funding agencies. We are at the university level, we are currently developing a research integrity office that will be looking at all research, both student research and the research done by faculty. So that's a step towards having a unit which is focusing on research. I know the University of Nairobi is also as a unit, especially the pediatric unit that deals with research. But I don't know how the structures, you know, from their funders, how they get their money. If we all know that sometimes if you commingle this money, some of the funding agencies get a little uncomfortable, especially if we know most of the audits that are done in the public institutions always have you know, question marks. And so if you don't have an audit that is correct, then you don't get funded. And that's why in AMPATH we try to have a section which can be audited separate from the main university audit and come out clean. So yes, it's a challenge, but I think it's something that we can progressively work towards achieving a better university coordinated research. I know in Kampala, I think there are Makerere, they have a unit which is almost similar to AMPATH. But we need to put these experiences together by bit and get something that can be you know, shared with the other institutions.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Before I go back to Dr. Sigei, there's Dr. Yonga shared that if you visit the Royal Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, usually they do offer some small grants, sometimes up to around £5,000 that you can use for early formative work. A lot of this research, sometimes these funds usually don't require a very long track record of research, so it's good to look out for such small grants when you have initial work. Sorry, I can hear an echo. So when you demonstrate that you've used the smaller grants, then usually you can have access to the bigger grants. So check the site shared by Dr. Yonga on the chat. Yes, and I think Dr. Bosire indicates that research is apprenticeship and mentorship cannot be overemphasized. So it's really important that you look out for people already in the research, talk to them, because as COVID has shown, really people need to also prioritize local research to answer local problems. And a lot of this can be done within your clinical areas. One last comment was, how can health facilities with help of current local hire educational institutions or other partners collaborate to enhance research for healthcare aimed at achieving UHC? Can I give that to Dr. Kemugisha? That's the last question.
Repeat the question again, sorry.
How can health facilities, with the help of current local higher educational institutions or other partners, collaborate to enhance research for healthcare aimed at achieving UHC? So basically,
so
how
much.
can, yeah, okay.
I think I understand the question. How can my camera, I can work without the camera.
Yes.
How can health facilities work with the universities towards achieving universal health coverage through research, something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, there is potential, and I think there are rich opportunities for universities to work with the clinical team in implementation research of the best evidence-based strategies to improve healthcare delivery. Health system strengthening research is being conducted widely, and most of the research that is being conducted currently in the health professions, it's in collaboration with the universities. In Uganda, where I come from, medical schools are situated within universities, and most of the research is done together with the hospitals where the students are being trained. So we have potential. Some people want a balance of whether they are leading only a clinical career or a career where your clinical skills can also be evaluated in a way that contributes to improvement of health systems. So I think there's potential to collaborate, and it's already existing. And I'm sure that most of the research that is being done, the cutting edge research that has led to system change, has been conducted in collaboration between universities and the hospitals where the clinicians are working. I do not know if I have answered the question very well, but I think what you have asked is already occurring. Maybe it can be strengthened in a way that clinicians or professionals can dedicate some time and document and evaluate their practices and see how they can lead to change. If we can give a scenario of advances in science, they have always been generated by our critical skills in observing what we do and how it can lead to change. When we look at professionals like Nightingale, simple hand washing procedures that led to eradication of epidemics of diarrheal diseases and other infectious illnesses. So I think there's potential for collaboration as long as we are willing to create this time, as Professor said, create time aside to take interest in research and having your clinical work or experiences be shared across the world to improve our current practices. Thank you.
Can I just add something?
Yes, Prof.
Empath is exactly what that question asks. Empath is a collaboration between the referral hospital, MTRH, Moi University, which is an academic institution, and the counties. And we do our research within the background of leading with care, so that the care that we do in the counties that we serve in Western Kenya receive care, initially HIV, now we are into NCDs, cancers, and so on. And so the questions coming from the field when this care is being delivered is what is making us be able to do the research. So it's already an example, and I think other institutions can be able to copy from that and learn from what we have made very successful in the region. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. And I think that just emphasizes the point that you also need to, for example, where our AMPATH operates, be curious to some of the data that they collect and get in touch with Prof. Nyandiko and others at AMPATH and MTRH to see how some of that data can be used to answer some of the questions that you may have. Because of time, we would like to bring this towards the end. I would like to thank our two presenters today who have given us excellent talks about how to go around applying for grants and funding in research. This is something that I'm sure it's always a question for most of us because we do go through those challenges of accessing grants and more so accessing them consistently so that one could pursue a research career. But as you've said, it's something that can be done and you can do it, and it's just that you don't give up and pursue it as rigorous as you'd pursue a clinical career or other careers. So thank you very much, and I'll bring it back to you, Dr. Sigay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ketch, as well as our two excellent speakers, and of course the audience for that engaging Q&A session. Just a reminder that the presentation in terms of the recording will be available on the KMA YouTube channel. So for those of you who came in late and for those who may want to watch it again and share with others who missed, it will be available on that channel. At this point, because of time, I'll quickly invite the KMA Secretary General, Dr. Simon Kigondu, to give a vote of thanks and bring the meeting to a close. Dr. Kigondu, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the APHRC team for a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you very much, Prof. Nyandiko. I think as we continue with these scientific sessions, we are empowering our members, and the Kenya Medical Association is there to work with partners to strengthen the medics, and in this way we will promote our scientific studies, and want to thank the research committee for the good work that they're doing, the dedication, the East African Medical Journal, and at this point I also want to thank the KMA National Executive Committee members, the President, Dr. Were, Dr. Amos Mutara, who I can see on the call, for their presentation. I think we'll continue with these initiatives, and with that, I want to bring the meeting to a close and thank all of you for participating in this very enlightening session. Thank you very much, and let's see you again in about a month. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.